And I'm live. Hello, everybody. Thanks again for joining me tonight. I'm glad to be back, and I'm going to be discussing a few different things tonight. I'll kind of get into it. In a way, it's kind of some of the same stuff again. It's funny how the world keeps repeating itself, or the stories and the news keep repeating themselves. And I was kind of thinking about it today. How much can you go on let's say a nightly basis and talk about some of the same stuff? I actually think quite a lot because the issues remain the same. Some of the, like I'm going to talk about Helen McEntee here in a second. So long as she keeps uploading dumb videos about migration, I'm going to keep responding to them. So that's kind of the how it's going to work. So I'll get into some of the topics for tonight. But I'll just let you know first, my links are below the video for what is it? Go buy me a coffee and PayPal and all that. And you can super chat as well, of course, tonight. Whether it's €1, don't be shelling anything out you can't afford. So if it's a lot or if it's a little, doesn't matter. If you want to give a super chat, I'll read it at the end. You could just make a point or you can ask a question, whatever you like. So that's that plug out of the way. And you can follow me on social media as well. Twitter, you can subscribe on YouTube and on Telegram as well. Mainly Twitter, that's where you find me most days. But so tonight I want to talk about, I'm just checking here to see if everything's good. Yeah. I want to talk about, like Helen McEntee's dropped another video and it's ratioed into oblivion on Twitter. She wants to have a frank discussion on migration, apparently. And it's just a video lecturing us about the EU migration pact. And it's not exactly a discussion. I'll get into that more. I also want to discuss the fascinating phenomenon that today, I mean, like I opened with tonight, the fact that sometimes you have to discuss some of the same stuff. Sorry, just a noise like outside the room there. I think I'm okay. But you have to discuss like some of the same stuff just keeps coming up. And it's like, okay, on one side, it's like, do you say the same thing every night? Well, it's always kind of different and the themes are the same. And also nobody else is talking about it. So what else are you going to do? Turn on RTE or listen to more real life lore videos on YouTube or something about nonsense. So, it's easy competition anyway to just talk about this stuff. Anyway, my point being, it's the same because last night, I was talking about Helen McEntee and how her statement in Dáil Éireann was just basically fobbing it off, saying that migration is amazing, everything's great, and it's wonderful, and etc. And that was kind of my point. And I, in a broader sense, I was saying that the regime have a complete inability to deal with the reality on the ground. Again, I'm repeating myself, but you have pepper spray, you have helicopters and all this in Newtownmountkennedy. You have other things I'll talk about tonight, the whole kit and caboodle, right? And they're just ignoring it. They refuse to just kind of, ironically enough, have a frank discussion about it. Just a frank discussion, even if it's a bit biased and they have their view and their doctrine and their dogma, at least have some kind of discussion, grant some credence to your critics, right? Your critics being 80% plus of the population, grant some credence to it. And that was my point. And that the regime, sort of broadly speaking, would reach for any excuse to diminish or dismiss the concerns of the vast majority of people in the country. Anyone with a shred of common sense, the concerns that they have. And today what we saw was this bizarre kind of thing where a Sky News open source intelligence journalist, sounds more like a spook to me, but it doesn't really matter. The line between journalist for Sky News and sort of semi-spook for the likes of ISD, some sort of a misinformation extremism researcher, and straight up intelligence operative for a state intelligence agency. The line between all that is very vague, and it's like being a hall monitor, as Americans call it, or some sort of invigilator of public discourse. So one of these guys working for Sky News or something, British, I suppose. I think the guy's Scottish. He did one of these things that they love to do, where they map online activity effectively. it doesn't take a genius to do it. You could just use a million different apps to do these things, or search for trends or whatever. But he searched for trends of who was posting on Twitter about topics, Irish topics like Ireland is full, about Newtownmountkennedy, Ireland for the Irish, key search terms like that. And he discovered that basically, like, the largest amount of commentary came from the United States, and a lot from the UK as well, and then a good bit from Ireland. But they're trying to spin this narrative that foreign interference or something like that, foreign interference in Irish political discourse. And I suppose I'll get into it in more detail in a sec, but it's nuts. Like, stick with me for this, because it's kind of, it's mind-boggling. It's along the lines of, and this is what I was saying about McEntee yesterday as well, this kind of narrative you have about Baghdad Bob in Iraq in whenever it was, 2002 or 3 or something, whenever the US invasion happened. The idea with Baghdad Bob, the joke was, and it was probably a bit of propaganda, US propaganda, but the joke was that, well, he was talking about how Saddam Hussein's Ba'athist army was holding the Americans back and everything was going fantastically. And meanwhile, there was a US tank kind of rolling by just out the window behind him on the street of, like, Baghdad or wherever it was. And that's what you're kind of at. Or kind of like a dictator in his final moments in the bunker, determined that they're going to retake the country or something like that from the invading force. We're going to fight a partisan war. We're going to take it back. Meanwhile, they're like, there's like, tear gas canisters coming down the drain or whatever it is. And it's nuts. It's nuts. I want to, like, it really is crazy. And I'm looking forward to talking about that. I also want to talk about, there's stuff kicking off in Newtownmountkennedy. People aren't happy there. There's more footage emerging about that. What else did we have? The guy in Ockram who enthusiastically attempted to persuade a contractor to leave site when they thought he was allegedly working on a migrant plantation center. That guy, from what I can tell in news reports, has been arrested. Kind of want to talk about that. And this other story as well has emerged, that there's a fresh drive to buy up properties for asylum seekers. There's up to 100. This is an Irish Independent article. They're trying to buy up properties now just to put asylum spoofers directly into houses. So basically, just like Roderick O'Gorman said a few years ago, buy up houses and shove these guys in. It's pretty nuts. I see Last Trugale is there in the chat. Welcome to you, everybody in the chat, of course, but especially to Last Trugale. We must have a talk soon, maybe on a stream or something. If you're up for it, that'd be good. But so I'll just ease into things. Let's just watch Helen McEntee, and let's just kind of, I love watching footage because I don't have to talk as much on these streams a little bit. It's nice to relax. So let's just watch Helen McEntee and look at the ratio on this. You probably can't see it. I'll kind of big it up just so you can see maybe. So the ratio there is, for those who don't know, ratios are relevant. For those who aren't familiar with how it works, if you get way more replies than likes, basically it means that you're extremely unpopular and your point is extremely unpopular. The ratio here is what, 7 to 1 or something like that. So anyway, without further ado, Helen McEntee wants to have a frank discussion about migration, but remember, it's a one-sided discussion. It's just a video, her second video in 2 days now, or speech that she's giving to us. And of course, while she's talking about having a frank discussion on immigration, she's also saying that anyone who's critical of immigration, and I don't think I'm exaggerating this really at all, that anyone who is strongly critical of immigration is far right. And if you're far right, you're potentially unpersoned and blacklisted, and you can't have a job, and you can't be a member of polite society, and you can't coach the local GA team, and you can't do any of this. These things will all be pulled from you. People don't understand the half of it. A lot goes on behind the scenes with activists and stuff. A lot of sort of punishments come people's way. More people have lost jobs than I think the public know, and been kind of ostracized from certain things because of this stuff. So, and that's of course a state issue, because most people agree 80% of people want less immigration, and yet if you're a person who comes out and with your face and you say it, there will be consequences. So that's how it is. But so she's talking about a frank discussion on immigration, which is a bit rich. It's like frank discussion is a really loaded up term. It's like let's take off the gloves and let's just be real. Let's have and also discussion. The two words are imperative there. Frank, being straightforward, not sugar coated. Let's just be real about it. And then discussion, which obviously implies that it's a two-way street. We're actually having a discussion about it. Let's get real. I know I'm rambling already, right? I'm going to give my Lee Kuan Yew bit. I was just thinking about this earlier. I've read his like autobiography, or maybe it's a biography. It's an autobiography. Lee Kuan Yew. It's a great book. And for years, I've been a big fan of his clips online and that kind of stuff. A statesman who is extremely admirable, founder of Singapore, basically. And again, I wouldn't agree with everything he ever did and that, but he was a semi-authoritarian sort of leader. And there's lots of videos of him basically with his sleeves rolled up talking about sometimes he had to censor certain things. Sometimes he had to force integrate different ethnic communities. Sometimes he had to hang drug traffickers, various things like that. And he always went to the public and explained it while he was force integrating people. I know this is a tangent, but while he was doing that, he would level with the public and say, this is not natural. I am interfering in your personal affairs, but this is the only way that this country, because it's a cleavage that was built into the founding of this country, that you had a Chinese population, a Malay population, a Tamil Indian population, an English white hangover population from colonial days. And those are the cards we're dealt. And so I'm going to be frank, and I'm going to come to you and say that it is authoritarian. It is interfering in personal matters, making people live integrated and all of this and speak certain languages. And what else is it? It's interfering in personal matters. And it's and he would also say that, the different races and the different religions and cultures, they're not equal. They're different. Some have higher capacities in certain things than others, and that's the way it is. And I'm not God. I can't change you. But so here's the reality. Here's what it is. I'm going to do certain things that have to be done. And here's my argument for why it's the least bad option we have. And I'm taking responsibility for it. So I'm standing here at the podium with the people, speaking the truth, right? You can like or lump what I say, but I'm speaking the truth. I'm being honest. And I am the statesman. I am the leader. I'm not some fickle politician who's not really in control of anything. If you have a problem with what's going on, or or whatever, you know where to find me. Here I am. I'm heavy as the head that wears the crown. And he would take responsibility in that sense. So, real statesmen like that, people like Lee Kuan Yew. I keep mentioning Asians. I want to say Deng Xiaoping and Xi Jinping, and even the likes of Putin. At least they take responsibility for their ruling capacity, basically. Whereas someone like McEntee, it's McEntee one week and it's Simon Harris the next, and it's Roderick O'Gorman, and then it's Charlie Flanagan or whatever. And they don't really decide anything. But it's I mean, how did I get from Helen McEntee to Lee Kuan Yew, you might ask? I'm kind of wondering myself. It's kind of like when I think of someone like Lee Kuan Yew, what he would have done is, there in a situation like this where there's some sort of rebellious uprising in a country, he might say, I'm going to crush it. It is what it is. But here's my reasoning, and I take full responsibility for it. And I'm being honest about the input factors. So this is actually something I was chatting to someone earlier about, which is that if we're being honest, if they were being honest, if the likes of McEntee were being honest, and I would actually have more respect for this, if someone like her stood up, or any other politician in the Dáil, and said, this country is ran by multinational corporations, Gumbeans like Seamus McEntee, Banty, Gumbeans who own plantation centres and Mel Sutcliffe, right? The country's ran by people like that, by multinational corporations like Pfizer and Google and all of that, and by major investment funds, mostly in Wall Street, American-based and that. And they run the country, and they give us scraps off the table in tax receipts, and that's how the country runs. That's the model we live under, and we believe it's better than alternative options. And so we're going to rule in their interest, and the rest of us will get the scraps off the table. Maybe if we did something different, we would all be peasants living in huts. And so that's our belief, is that it's a choice between one or the other. And so we're going to rule in their interest, and that's it. That'd kind of be real and honest. Like Lee Kuan Yew, let's say, never ruled in such a treacherous way, but whatever way he did rule in, you can see in his speeches on YouTube and in his writings that he basically came to the public always with the brutal reality, whether you like it or lump it, or whether it seems harsh or whatever. He just came with the reality and said, this is what I'm doing. It was almost like he would come to the public and speak to them like he would speak to his closest confidants in the room. I would say, this is what I'm just being totally honest about how this state is running and what our agenda is and what we're doing. Whereas we're not getting that at all. So that's how it relates back to McEntee. Someone like him, for example, too, and a real statesman, here's what they would do. They would have gone down to Newtownmountkennedy, either before or after the kind of fracas happened up at the centre. He would have gone down to Newtownmountkennedy and said, again, rolled up sleeves, walked in, a certain amount of security detail, but because he expects a certain amount of respect as a statesman, just walk into Newtownmountkennedy, find the leaders in the group, not NGO leaders, but real leaders. And he would go, okay, get 20 people. We're going to sit down in a room. We're going to talk. Okay. And he would say, we're not going to have mass deportations of everyone. We are not going to, I'm speculating, right? Obviously he's dead and he's Singaporean, we're Irish, but he would have said, we're not going to have massive deportations. We're going to have some and all that, but we're not going to do like the most drastic course change possible. The Ireland that you once knew, that was a de facto ethno state, is over, and we are now in this multinational corporation world, and that's kind of how it is. And we're not going to U-turn on that 100%. We're not going to do some drastic, violent course correction on that. But I hear what you're saying. These people are being brought in en masse, and it is crazy. And the demographics of the Irish population have been reduced so much over 20 years, and without being asked. Much like we give minorities rights and protections, we have to also give Irish people protections. We have to give Irish communities protections. We have to stop with the asylum nonsense. Immigration has to be reduced back to just what IBM needs and just what all these companies need. And we're going to have a reasonably cosmopolitan, multicultural society to a point where, like we say, the minorities are protected and their interests are protected, but the founding stock of the country, the core of the country, must be protected and maintained, and the concerns of that majority must be listened to. And so what I'm going to do is offer you a suite of radical change in a certain way, but in another way I'm going to demand that this kind of rebellious uprising has to stop. And so we're going to be authoritarian, and we're going to pursue a new Ireland in a way, as described by the regime in real life. But here's the compromise. And again, perhaps in the chat some of you would disagree. That's not my view. I'm just saying that that's what someone like an authoritarian or a real leader like Lee Kuan Yew would bring forth, to say, this is the model of the state that we're pursuing. I'm going to be totally honest with you. You're going to be honest with me, and I'm going to listen to you, and you're going to listen to me. And that's how it is. And he would meet the people there. So, it's kind of nuts that we have this bizarre regime where we all know Helen McEntee, for God's sake, doesn't run anything, and nor does Simon Harris or any of this. And yet they're kind of the spokespeople. I think of them kind of like actors, basically, like a TV show. They're these actors that come to us with these platitudes that are completely meaningless. And of course, they offer us a frank discussion about migration. Again, there's more likelihood and a more frank discussion offered probably by Kim Jong-un, or whatever his name is, the North Korean guy. There's probably a higher level of back and forth between the general demands and wishes of the population in North Korea and him and his dynasty than there is between these people. So frank discussion is completely nonsense and rich. But let's, with all that said, listen to McEntee. By the way, she's going to talk about the migration pact. She's going to give the platitudes that actually this is going to help Ireland. This is going to control migration. Far from being a flood of migration and surrendering control, it actually gives us control. It's all consensual as per what is in the best interest of Ireland. We're not forced to do anything, and it will actually reduce numbers and control and vet people and all that kind of stuff. Now, if you want to retort to that, I'm not going to address all that in detail. There's a channel called, I think it's called The Layman's Take on YouTube. Put up I'd hate to direct people away from this stream right now, you know, stick with me. But he did a good video. I think the best video I've seen so far, probably, sort of picking through the details on that. It's nonsense. Anyway.
We need to have a frank conversation about migration. It's time to dispel some of the myths.
Can I just say as well, someone in my chat or my replies earlier said that it's like being brought to the principal's office in school. It's so funny.
We need to have a frank conversation about migration. It's time to dispel some of the misinformation about the EU Migration and Asylum Pact. The Pact is an EU-wide response to migration. It will update and improve our current immigration laws, and it will ensure that we are not dealing with this on our own. We've helped to shape the Pact, so there is nothing in it that doesn't benefit Ireland. Applications for international protection will be dealt with quicker, so this means that people will get their decisions quicker and they'll spend less time in state accommodation. Where the decision is negative, it will also be easier to return people to their country of origin.
By the way, right? Now, I'm sure she's a sharp talker and a sharp thinker in her own right, but I imagine she probably took at least a couple of hours, and of course all the production is done by other people, so that's not her issue. She just comes along and sits on her funny little chair in her, like, behind her, or in front of her screen. But she probably had to spend a few hours. You know, this is somewhat rehearsed. She's rattling it off. Like, just think about yesterday, she had to practice her little lines for the Dáil Éireann. That probably took up a decent proportion of her day. And then today she wakes up and she gets into the office. There's a whole team of advisors and all these people, and they say, here's the script, here's what you're saying. Take a couple hours to read over it and, you know, get yourself together, and then we're going to record that. Like, that probably took up a decent portion of her day to put this out. And everybody, like I say, 959 replies. I know I'm interrupting the video, but that's how it works. All the replies are just like, is this a comedy sketch? Is anyone buying this? No one has faith in you to deliver. You know, just like a torrent of replies just being like, don't make me laugh. And you know what, it kind of reminds me as well, as like, when you talk about having a frank discussion about migration, the country is so far past that now, and we're in such an sort of almost into like an anarchy phase or something like that on this whole issue. Like, it's gotten so out of control. It's kind of like, I want to tell her that, like, listen, Helen, darling, you know, and that's not sexist references, that's just a casual remark. You know, we respect women and all of that. But you know, Helen McEntee, or any of them, Simon Harris, you could probably call him darling as well. But you know, if we're having a frank discussion on migration, like, I'm just some lowly streamer here, marginalized from polite society, we'll say. But I mean, I can have a frank discussion on immigration. I can have people listen to me. Others can potentially too. You can't. I mean, we're too far past all of that now. It's not your conversation to have anymore. It's out of your hands. It's out of the political class's hands. It's out of the NGO's hands and the mainstream media and all of that. It's completely out of your hands now. You can't. It doesn't work like that. You know. Anyway, I'll go ahead with the video.
I have already introduced a new system to ensure that applications from certain countries are dealt with quicker. And what's happened is the number of people coming from those countries has dropped by 50%. The pact will...
Okay, so let's just go back 10 seconds on that, right? Because it's important.
To ensure that applications from certain countries are dealt with easier to return people to their country of origin. I have already introduced a new system to ensure that applications from certain countries are dealt with quicker. And what's happened is the number of people coming from those countries has dropped by 50%.
Now, I'm not exactly sure what she's referring to, but her idea that, well, I've introduced measures to reduce applications from certain countries and to reduce application, or I've introduced certain measures and it's led to a reduction of 50%, right? Now, again, it kind of defeats her point, because it's like, well, you're going around telling people that we can't go it alone, which is the like mantra. But of course, now you're boasting about what you've done has reduced things by 50%. You've done that in ahead of any EU migration pact being introduced. So it sounds like you do have some capacity to control or change what's happening. Secondly, and I'm speculating here, I'm not sure exactly. She doesn't specify what she's referring to, but let's just say she's talking about the likes of, because she's mentioned this recently. Let's say she's talking about the likes of redesignating the likes of Georgia, Tbilisi, with one of the fastest growing economies in the world. I think a lower crime rate than Dublin, that kind of stuff. No war, all of that. Like it's a safe country, like not just technically, but literally in every sense. And so is Algeria, so is Nigeria, so is Albania, so is London, etc. The majority of these countries, even the Ukraine, people could just move west if they wanted to into the safe parts. But let's just take the likes of a Georgia specifically as an example. Someone like her comes out and says, well, let's say I've moved that into the safe country designation and I've reduced the numbers coming from there by 50%. Again, if we're having a legitimate, frank discussion about migration and you're trying to sell us your wares, and in order to do that, you need to at least should demonstrate some legitimacy, you're doing that by telling us about this reduction. But take something like Georgia. Why would you come and tell us that there's been a reduction in applications from a country like Georgia, and let's say it's down by 50%, and shouldn't we be so grateful? Why isn't it down by 100%? Why, in fact, why isn't it down by 400 or 500% if you include the ones that are here already? So maybe they're grandfathered in. Why are they not just being immediately told to pack their bags and piss off home? Like, as in all due respect, but like, go enjoy Georgia. It's a nice country. Go home, leave. Like, the idea that you reduce something that shouldn't be happening at all by 50%, it's wrong in every direction. So on one hand, she's demonstrating that she does have control, but on another sense, she's demonstrating that that control is being completely misused. Like, it's not being used right. You're reducing a complete spoof situation by 50%. And again, this we don't really know what this statistic refers to, so it could be even more nonsense than I'm even letting on. It could be specifics of specifics and all of that, where it's not really any change at all. But it's kind of like, you can't come to the public at this point, as far and as radicalized as the majority of people are now on this issue, and tell us that you're trimming around the edges and that there's slightly less Algerians coming here to avail of free houses and free everything. The question has to be from us in return, why are there any of them? And so long as there are any of them, then you're not the person to come to us and talk about a frank discussion on migration. You're not. In fact, you're the last person. You may have the title Minister of whatever you are. What is she? Minister for Justice? Doesn't matter. But you might have that title, but that title is completely empty. It's a sort of ceremonial thing you have, and it's a power you have maybe with the guards and stuff, but the legitimacy is completely absent. It's not there at all. Someone like Philip Dwyer, someone like for all I dispute on someone like John McGurk and Gript and or like the likes of Ben and Matt Tracy and all these people out there who are speaking on these things. Even again, Niall Boylan, I might have certain criticisms, but people out there who are in the arena a little bit on this question and have legitimacy, they can talk about it, but you're just like, but for your official governmental role, you're completely irrelevant to this conversation. But anyway, it's kind of crazy, she's trying to refer it to the EU for like, oh, well, we can't go it alone as well. And I just want to talk about this for a second. We can't go it alone. We have to do the EU migration pact. And it's like, say you're sitting there talking to her and you say, okay, your name's Helen McEntee. My name's Garen Murphy. Nice to meet you. Who are you? And she says, I'm the Minister for Justice or whatever in Ireland. You go, okay, so you're the minister. What are you the minister of? Are you the minister of super value? Are you the minister of Zambia? Are you the minister of Bhutan? What's the story? But like, what are you the minister of? She says, I'm the minister of the government of Ireland. Okay, so your remit is in Ireland primarily. You have a mix of things that you do, but that's your job. So why are you telling me now that we can't go it alone on something as basic as a migration policy? Are you the minister for Brussels? Are you the minister, like I say, for super value? Or are you the minister for Ireland? Like, your mandate and your legitimacy in order to rule, and for us to apparently respect the fact that you're in this position, is based on the fact that you're governing Ireland. So, but you're telling us that but for this migration pact, you are completely incapable of governing this country. And again, well, certain things are caught up in red tape, and it's, certain things are draconian. We can't do it. There's institutional inertia and all of that. I always go back to this. In 2020, we went, over the course of a couple of weeks, they went from beginning with saying lockdown is a conspiracy theory on WhatsApp and don't listen to it. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, lockdown was the law of the land by the same people who had been describing it as conspiracy theory. It was the law of the land. You weren't allowed to have guests over to your house, and you had to have a good excuse for going more than 2 kilometers from your house. Even me, I lived in Mountjoy Square at the time. I don't know, I've probably told this before, but never mind 2 kilometers. I would go about 50 meters into Mountjoy Square Park, and I would read my book, leaning against a tree. What was I reading at the time? I can't remember. But I would do that, and when the guards would drive their car into the park and drive around in circles trying to shoo everyone out of the park, I had a skipping rope or something like that, or I would just jog on the spot while they went by. I wish I'd taken videos of this, because no one's going to believe me. My kids aren't going to believe me when I tell them this. But I would have to, when they would go by, basically put the book down, get up and do like star jumps or something as they go by, and look at them and give them a nod to be like, oh yeah, I'm exercising. They would go by, go back to reading my book, and then 10 minutes later they'd come around and I would go through the same nonsense again. And they, I mean, if you're able to do that for
the pact will allow us to access EU funding,
then you can do whatever you want. So it's just complete lies and nonsense. So anyway, let's listen.
To help us to continue to improve our systems. We'll have access to an EU database that's enhanced so that we have better screening for people that are entering the EU and entering Ireland. Many people seeking international protection in Ireland, we've actually already applied in another EU country. The pact will make it easier.
Again, I'm going off, but like, better screening and all of that. Okay, look, I'm not part of a global migration pact. I'm not a party to it. There is no, as far as there's no effective global migration pact anyway. There's the UN one, but it's not actually in practice in reality. If I go to, I always bring up China. It goes for India. It goes for anywhere. If I go to China, they don't have to have some sort of supranational assistance with checking databases and all of that. No, I just go to China, and I have to, before I get there, I'll have to go through a lengthy process through the embassy. I'm sure it's very hard even to get in there now. Even as a tourist, it's a bit of rigmarole. Same with Russia. Even before the war, I was actually, before in 2020, I had a holiday planned to Iran and Russia. That's another story, but well, look, it was to Iran, and it was via Russia with a day, like a 12-hour long layover in Moscow. That's as good as we could get. And I was just like, well, I'll get 12 hours to see Moscow. It'll be interesting. But like, trying to actually arrange a holiday was next to impossible. Point being, and that never happened. It got cancelled. But point being, I go to Russia, I go to China, I go to any of these places. I mean, to say that I need my passport, to present my passport when I get there is an understatement. Before that, I have to basically tell them about my whole life before I even arrive, by going to the embassy, getting forms, getting applications. Before I even get a right to effectively buy a ticket, I'll have to have told them my, kind of in a sense, my whole life story, all my details, my numbers, my record, everything. This massive process. And then when I get there, obviously the passport is shown. I'm me. I'm the guy who sent in all those forms. I intend to stay here for 2 weeks. I'm staying at this location, la, la, la. So again, Russia and China or whoever else, they don't require some sort of supranational database. They just have their own system. and it's stringent. And if I can't meet that, then I better just piss off and not come. And if I do try to somehow get to their border points or points of access without those things, it's a good chance I'm going to be arrested. So it's nuts that like her and the rest of them are talking about this idea that how would we possibly be able, like, we need these supranational measures in order to be able to stop people with no documentation and no real reason for being here from coming into our country. I mean, that's the most basic primal full stop function of a state and a country to begin with. If you can't do that, and you're telling us that you can only sort of do it if we sign up to this EU pact, which ultimately is a supranational institution, it's not our country is fundamentally Ireland. Again, that's why you're here. You're telling us you're Helen McEntee and you're a governor of a sovereign territory. So you either are or you're not here. If you can't do that, then just go away. Just shoo. Just go on off. Like, you're not the person.
To return people to the country that they first applied in. I keep hearing this suggestion that we're going to be forced to accept 30,000 people or face huge fines. Let me be very clear. We will never be forced to take people from another country. Never. The pact will help us to address the key inefficiencies in our system. But if we don't opt in, we will become the weak link.
We'll never be forced. We've seen Poland and Hungary, and they're not even that radical or whatever, but they've tried to implement certain laws and they've been sanctioned and harassed and harangued by by Brussels constantly for it. We know this is in the layman's take video. It's very good. Like I said, it might be a certain quota now, but of course, when there's a war in Sudan and there's climate change in Guyana and the Dominican Republic has an earthquake, and suddenly it's propaganda everywhere. Ukraine flags everywhere. Dominican Republic flags up and down O'Connell Street like they had with Ukraine, and it's a big propaganda drive. And we must take another 300,000 people, and the rules have just been adjusted after the fact. I mean, you can't look any person in the face and tell us that that's not exceedingly possible. So the idea that she's just describing that, dismissing it as a myth, is just nonsense. They've completely lost trust and lost faith from the public on this. I mean, like everybody said in the replies to this video, your mouth is moving, you're lying,
In Europe, and the numbers arriving will most definitely increase. We cannot deal with what is a global challenge by acting alone.
Yeah, it's not a global challenge. It's our own challenge. I keep saying it over and over again, but you're the governing individual here. It's your issue. If you renounce the ability to govern this country yourself, then, like I say, just go away. Just go on off into the bushes, and we'll get someone else who wants to govern this country. That's the claim they make. That's their claim to legitimacy, and we will hold them to that standard. You govern this country. Otherwise, we'll just get rid of you, and we'll talk to Brussels, and we'll have some sort of revolution based on that, or we'll bring it to the public. If you're trying, like, it's one or the other. So, I'm just so sick of it. It's every day now, another thing. But let's move on to this story. Is pretty funny. How big should I have my screen? Should I have it like this? Should I have it like that? I don't know. You don't. You can't probably see it on the screen anyway. But this is fascinating, right? So this is another story. And Paddy Cosgrave shared it, and I'm very disappointed in him. To be honest, he was always sort of part of the liberal establishment sort of NGO world, the Sinn Féin thing. He'd gotten into bed with that whole milieu, sort of, I don't know. And he's always been a bit of a firebrand and all of that, but he got in with that milieu in the last couple of years, became this kind of demagogue online in recent years. And some people say it's related to he's got this vendetta against the Irish state because of how they kind of screwed him years ago, which they kind of did. I don't know what, I'm not a mind reader. I don't know what's going on with the guy, but it seems almost like to me that, yeah, he was a bit of a lib, kind of regimist, Sinn Féin type for years. But to me, it almost seems like since he you know, I don't know if you've ever seen Paranormal Activity 2, but there's a scene where the woman in the house is sort of dragged into the basement. The basement door opens basically, and an invisible hand drags her down into the basement. The door shuts, and then like 10 hours elapses on the camcorder thing, you know, the video, and then the door swings open and she walks out, and she looks like she's in a bit of a daze, and you're kind of thinking, okay, the demons got into her in some fashion there, and she's kind of in a catatonic state after it. I don't know what's going on with Cosgrave, because he's kind of doubled down on the shit livery sort of narratives since he was cancelled by Zionists, and then I don't know, a few months later, given his release in some fashion, came back. Now, at the time, originally, all he did was come out and say that like Israel shouldn't commit war crimes. That's basically, from what I can remember, what he said. The mildest critique ever, but it was after October 7th and all that. And he was like cancelled and pushed out. And then he came back in, and just like Paranormal Activity, since he's came back, it's almost like he's got this, he's going full NGO Irish Times kind of mode on all these culture issues, or this kind of culture war, let's say, in Ireland, to do with migration and all of that. Just a few weeks ago, or just a few days ago, he was trying to say, him and others were trying to say that anti-immigration activism in Ireland is a NATO plot, NATO/UK military plot, etc. I mean, I don't know what to say about that. But more recently today, he's parroting this Sky News thing that I mentioned earlier about foreign interference in Irish narratives. Him and loads of others, Colette Brown, loads of them. They're all gobbing onto this thing that, just take this one, for example. So Ireland is full, the hashtag, 72,000 people posted about it in the US, and 37,000 people posted about it in Ireland. I mean, what can I even say about that? Like, it's one of those things that I'm almost gobsmacked, and it's hard to find the words to address something like that. The idea being that, okay, so the basic concept, to me, this is what would fit what they're talking about, right? The inference that there's this nefarious, either whether it's bot or foreign interference, a plot, all of that would be, if you went online and let's say 20% of the posts about Ireland is full or Newtownmountkennedy were or originated in Ireland, and then further to that, about 40% of them originated in Transnistria, and another proportion originated in North Korea, and some in Belarus, and some in Lesotho, right? You would be looking at that and going, that's some dodgy stuff. That's some sort of bot farm, some sort of foreign sort of people from another side of the curtain of different regimes geopolitically, artificially involving themselves in this domestic, what seems on the surface like a domestic issue, but it's actually completely astroturfed and fake. That's the kind of, that would be a legitimate point. They're trying to sort of transplant that notion onto the fact that how many is it? 72,000 come from the United States, 37,000 from Ireland, and like 10,000 from the UK, and certain smaller amount from Canada, etc. Now, I mean, am I even debasing myself to address this? But the points, I mean, the obvious points are, for one, there's a massive Irish population, not diaspora, just people who are straight up Irish. There's like 150,000 living in the US. There are loads in England, and if you were to say, where are the Irish people living in Ireland, or where are the Irish people living in the world besides Ireland, you would say US, Canada, UK, maybe Australia. So based on that alone, it's not surprising that there's a big transfer over there. Then take the United States, for example. The broader diaspora in the United States, the ones who are a descendant from Irish people, who sort of identify as Irish culturally in terms of their ancestry and all that, there's about 40 million of them in the US. So the US is shot through with an Irish identity, effectively, at the level of tens of millions of people. Further to that, beyond that 40 odd million people, all the rest of the people living in the US, which is a population of 333 million officially, probably more, they have a massive issue. They're a Western country, so they have an English-speaking Anglophone country. They have big issues with illegal migration, Currently, there are major conversations happening within the US and the UK and Canada, the same as Ireland, about plantation centres. They don't call them that. That's an Irish thing, but illegal immigrants, asylum seekers being shoved in hotels and all that. It's the same for them too. So they have that going on a lot. So it's just relevant to even the non-Irish American ones. It's kind of relevant to them anyway. Further to that, they don't have, Ireland is more advanced in a sense that we have these big pushbacks, these mass demos and pushbacks and we'll say consternation happening and confrontations within communities with police and all that are happening at a much more developed level than we really don't see the likes of it in the US and the UK. So they're going to look at that and go almost live vicariously through the Irish, who are pushing back more than they are effectively. And they have an interest in this plucky small country that they have an exotic view of, that Ireland is this small little nation. I always thought of Ireland as everyone there is Irish, you know. People think, oh, it's crazy that multicultural globalism and all that has gone that far, that it's even in little old Ireland. So there are loads of reasons, right, why countries such as the US would have a big interest in this on a mass scale. And then there's just the basic factor of the internet. Something like Twitter operates on hashtags. This is the insanity. And again, I shouldn't be lowering myself to talking about this, because again, the reality is that they just don't have a better argument. So they're left with something like this. The internet does not operate by national borders. So the stabbing of the priest in Australia, let's say the burning of the Notre Dame Cathedral in France, in Paris. So, I mean, that's a very strange event that happened. We still don't know about that. That's another story. But when that happened, I haven't pulled up the stats on it, but you know, a lot of the commentary on that event at the time from Twitter, if you were to go through the origin of the posts and all that, hashtag Notre Dame or whatever, a whole lot of it would have been from America, from Ireland, from Poland, from Russia, from China even, but like a heck of a lot more than there probably was in France, even though every French person was talking about that. Just the asymmetry between the French population and the rest of the world. It's kind of like the Father Ted, small, far away type of thing. That's the internet. It doesn't operate by national boundaries. If there's a major earthquake in some little country, if there's a major earthquake in Greece or something, well, and it's like massive, devastating. Let's say Haiti, for example, right? The earthquake in Haiti. Did more people talk about the earthquake in Haiti? And you could say it's not non-political, but it's an event. It's something that captures the interest of the internet and people on the internet. Were there more people talking about the earthquake in Haiti, or were there more people talking about it in the US? Something as simple as that. Obviously, you would find, well, about 10 times more people mentioned the earthquake in Haiti online in the US than did in Haiti. I mean, it's the internet. That's how it works. That's the idea. Kind of crazy, but here's where I kind of got caught off guard a little bit. That the first thing I thought when I saw this earlier today was the proportions. I started calculating, well, the size of the US population, who are, by the way, from what I know, the US population, given its size, is about 80% of the English-speaking Twitter population, effectively, globally. So of users, like English-speaking users. So, and again, Twitter doesn't have some sort of firewall between Ireland, France, the US. It's just Twitter. And of course, I mean, this is crazy, but to even have to say this, but you know, I have followers on Twitter. A lot of them are American, a lot of them are Irish, a lot of them are English, some are probably Pakistani. Yeah, a mix. It's a global platform. So if I'm posting about Newtownmountkennedy and there's people being pepper sprayed and all of this, it's a big newsworthy, captivating event, salacious event. It would be shocking if you went on and looked at the data and found that 99% of it was from Ireland. How would that make any sense? Like, if I've got a mix of followers from all different places, largely Ireland, but lots of other places, why would it be 99% of people talking about it That's like some sort of cult. It's bizarre that and I would love to know if I had a mind reading device to just kind of go right into the deepest part of their mind and say, do you actually believe this? Like, do you really think that this is some sort of gotcha or some sort of issue? Do you really believe it, or are you just scoring points in some fashion because you think you can? Like, be honest with me. And I've talked about this a lot before, is the intentional retarding of public discourse. The sort of, I call it intentional public stupidity. But it's like, you're being intentionally stupid, aren't you? Like, you're an adult, you went to a university, not that that shouldn't really matter, but you know, you've gone through stats, you understand bias, you understand all these different concepts. Like, that's your whole gig. You went to college, you understand these things, you understand you've done the course in statistics and stuff, you understand per capita, you understand all these things, and yet they're just pretending that they don't. I just want to go through this a little bit, because there was this guy, Philip Pilkington. I have no idea who he is, doesn't matter. But he said, he basically replied to a lot of people putting forward this story of foreign interference. And by the way, like, there's a video going around today of an Indian guy telling people who've been in Ireland for 2 years how to vote and all of this, regardless of their visa status. Apparently that's not foreign interference, but someone on Twitter in the US just being like, oh, look, this happened in Newtownmountkennedy. That's crazy. That is foreign interference, apparently. So on one sense, it's like complete cosmopolitanism. But then when it comes to people from the US or the UK having an opinion on a matter of global public interest, suddenly they're like, oh, the fodden interference. We can't, like, suddenly we're going into complete Father Ted mode. It's crazy. But anyway, this guy kept replying to people. He did what my first instinct was, which is to break it down per capita and per population. Ireland is the Republic of Ireland, which is what they're referring to, has 5 million people. America has 333 million. So you know yourself. He broke it down by proportion, and for the Ireland is full one, if you crack it via proportionally, or kind of break it down proportionally, you end up with that actually 94% of the posts originated in Ireland proportionally, right? So this is what it blew my mind, the replies to this. All of these people, there's this guy, Kieran Nugent, and maybe I'm rambling, but this guy said, why on earth would you adjust for population? Worst tweet of all time. And there are loads of others. And I'm just like, I want to understand, are you lying? Do you really believe that your man inserting the population adjusted stats, do you really, they're trying to, oh, that's completely tangential, that doesn't matter, it's about the absolute figures and stuff like that. And these people, there are loads of them, right? Someone says, this tweet is embarrassing, you took the time to make this post. Oh, we might as well break it down per female ice hockey players. Let's just keep breaking it down by arbitrary proportions to try and adjust the number to your favor. That's what another person is saying here. I'm just going through it. Someone says, lads, I don't think you understand stats, mate. Population is not a factor in this. It's based on geographic location. Proportion has nothing to do with it and all this. Someone says, with laughing, crying emojis, you don't adjust for population size to determine where the majority of posts come from. I mean, what? Yeah, you do. Obviously you do. So America has, I did some numbers myself earlier, but it's basically got 330 million people. Ireland's got 5 million. And so they posted about it twice as much. But if you break it down for population, it means that an Irish person was like about 25 times more likely to post about it. So if you came to me and said that, well, if there's this issue in Ireland that touches on a culture war issue in America in a way, and there's a big Irish American population, and there's just major cultural similarity, and they all share the same internet space. If you told me that at least 22 times less people in America were talking about it, like for every 22 Irish people that mentioned it, there was going to be one American that chimed in. If you told me that it was any less than that, I'd be shocked, surely. I mean, that's the internet, right? Surely. I mean, why wouldn't a certain amount of them pop in? So they're still trying to say that it's irrelevant. And I don't know, you just come back to the basics of, like, if this is what they have to offer in the wake of Newtownmountkennedy, in the wake of all of this, if the best that they can offer, instead of coming back and saying, listen, here's why the immigration situation is not actually totally out of control, here's why it's not totally unfair. Matt Tracy, as he always does, excellent work in Gripped today, showed that Ukrainian students trying to go to university in Ireland, they get a grant. I don't remember all the details, but they get a grant effectively of 10, somewhere like 10 grand, just as a given, regardless of means. So they could be in their €400,000 BER rated, lovely modular home, paid for by the taxpayer. They could be in that with 2 Porsche Cayennes out the front, and they could be dripping in jewelry and totally rich, and their bank accounts could have millions of euro in them, and they'll get 10 grand regardless of means. But Irish people get mean tested up their arses, and they'll get like 3,000 for college, right? You know, instead of coming back on things like that and saying, listen, okay, a thing like that is a bit unfair and it's discriminatory, and there's no justification, there's no reasonable, rational justification for that. So that, I agree with you. I'm pro-migration, I'm anti-racism, but I agree that that isn't right. So take someone like Cosgrave, take someone like all these others. If they said, this is crazy, right? If they just said, just quite simply, I'm not so-called far right, I'm not racist, I'm pro-immigration, I'm pro-fairness and all this, whatever their nonsense is. If they said, I'm pro all that, but I will grant you that, I'm not going to do a culture war with you on this issue. What you're saying in the specific case about the Ukrainian and the lack of means testing and the unfairness, I mean, I'll just grant you that without an argument. That's true, that's unfair. They could come back and take the extreme excesses and say, I'll grant you all that, and let's have a debate. But in the general idea of like Ireland should be for the Irish and we should be ethno-nationalist and all this, I'm going to push back on that amount, and we're going to have a debate and go back and forth. I would say, fair enough. Okay, you're dealing with the argument, you have your point of view and all of that. But instead of doing that, they're coming back and saying that, oh, well, no, the US, an English-speaking country with a big Irish population, with a population how 70 times bigger than Ireland or whatever, commented in an absolute sense twice as much, but in a proportional sense, which is a completely legitimate way to look at it, they commented on it like 22 times less than Irish people. And it's just a case of small, far away. It's a case of big, small populations. It's a case of a borderless internet. They're back to that, and they're trying to say that there is a nefarious Russian interference, North Korean bot farms. That's what they're trying to imply, some sort of nefarious, contrived interference in this. And I had a post earlier, I don't have it to hand, but it's kind of like, here's the obvious way to look at it. Last weekend, there was a demonstration in Newtownmountkennedy. That was one of the posts they're talking about, the hashtag like Newtownmountkennedy. Last weekend, there was a demonstration in the town, and there were some people from Dublin and whatever, but the majority obviously were from the town, of probably thousands of people in the town. There's many, many pictures of it. And I made a joke earlier saying that, they were actually American holograms. All those people were fake as well. It's just like, you can't believe that that's true. You see that 80% of people are against, think that there's too much of immigration in Ireland. And you can see that thousands of people show up in a relatively small, relatively peripheral town of Newtownmountkennedy. I mean, it's a good couple of exits down the main motorway from Dublin. It is, in effect, in the middle of nowhere, in a sense. And there were thousands of people out. It's on video. So, again, if it was all American bots or something, you would expect there to be no... Again, if you were just being an adult, a grown adult, a reasonable person, you would compare your theory about some sort of a nefarious online activity and that the interest in this is completely inflated, it's not actually real, it's counterfeit. You would go, well, let's compare it to the real life then. Let's compare it to what people believe in Ireland en masse, not NGOs, not Paddy Cosgrave in his mansion in Donegal and everything else. Not that, but just the population as polled. 80% of people think it's too much. Then you would go to somewhere like Newtownmountkennedy and you would say, wow, there's thousands of people here at this thing in this town. Then you would say, well, maybe that's just Newtownmountkennedy. You'd go to Coolock and you'd see that there's tons of people out in Coolock, and you'd see thousands of people. You will see quite soon in Dublin, 6th of May, there's going to be a demo against mass immigration. It's probably going to be 10,000 people there. I don't know how many. But, you know, again, we're back to intentional public stupidity, burying the head in the sand and putting forth fake arguments. You can't just keep doing this. Helen McEntee can't keep getting up and saying that migration is wonderful. Anyone who says otherwise is far right. You can't look at something like Newtownmountkennedy and say, oh, it's just some American plot, some sort of American MAGA plot, or God knows what the theory really is. And like I said, this guy here, Kieran Nugent, right? I'll just look at his bio. So his bio says that he's an economist with the Nevin Economic Research Institute, and that he is a PhD candidate, excuse me, in Maynooth or something. And he's a lecturer of political economy, I think, in Maynooth as well. So all these different like roles, academic roles. And you're telling me that you're, with a straight face, you're telling me that you're asking, why on earth would you adjust for population on something like this? I mean, your whole gig is that you're meant to be an academic. And it's quite obvious that per capita, I mean, it's nuts. Why would you adjust for that? This is the level of, and again, I don't know, I'm tortured by the conflict in my mind of, are they that stupid or are they that deluded? I don't know. But like, we're dealing with this janissary class effectively of the, or apparatchiks, whatever term you want to use. And it's very small. It's a tiny minority of Irish population, but they have a lot of power in a certain way. They've been given power in the discourse, that even I'm addressing this in a way, you know, I feel like it's necessary that they can come out with the reality in this country, such as it is. They can come out with the most obtuse, sideways nonsense and say that this is the argument we're going to debate on. It's just completely insane with what's going on the street. And I suppose I'll move on to the next story now, which is, and I see the chat going there. I suppose I'll just read super chats at the end. There's too many normal ones to kind of keep up with. I'll just get distracted, you know. But there's a story here. I know Last True Gael was kind of putting a lot of attention onto this earlier. He had a post about it, but he was just effectively talking about how this is going to diminish the supply of housing in the country more than is already being done. I mean, obviously. But just the Irish Independent, I'll skim through it. Fresh drive to buy up properties for asylum seekers. There's up to 100 migrants on Mount Street. It's a big long article written by like 4 different people. But it's a bit vague in a sense. In one sense, they want to buy large properties like plantation centres and do them up. But they're also talking about apparently just kind of buying up houses. So the Department of Integration is looking for buildings that either need extensive renovation or are in usable condition. A tender of expressions for interest has been put out. So from what I can tell, it includes just houses, just to put these people in. And we have a housing crisis. I mean, we have Irish people, I posted about this earlier, Irish people who are losing sleep and literally worried sick, like actually getting sick probably, from figuring out how they're going to pay for groceries to feed their families. You have marriages probably at an increased rate falling apart under financial pressure. There's that old phrase, I heard it when I was a kid and it always stuck with me. The whole idea of when poverty comes in the door, love goes out the window or up the chimney. And it's a very sad fact, but it's real. That's happening to people. I mentioned recently again, 75% of men aged 25 to 29 are at home in their bedroom that they grew up in. And working families are on the brink of homelessness very often. So if you're paying €1,800 in rent or whatever for a house for you and your 2 kids, and because of the cost of everything, you can't actually save up the deposit, even though you might be making between you decent enough income. But just because of the cost of everything and just because of the cost of the rent, you kind of can't save for a deposit. So you're trapped in the rent. But then, of course, if the landlord comes and tells you he's renovating or family have to go in, then you're out on your ear. And if you go on daft, you're already spending a lot anyway. So you can't kind of up your rent budget as is. But even hypothetically, if you could, there just mightn't be anything on daft. There's nothing to rent on daft, right? So you might be in a position where you're going, we earn a decent wage. We're actually not, like on paper, we're not badly off. 5 years ago, we were comfortably middle class. and on our way in life and all this. And now we're at the point where we're struggling to afford basics, and we're potentially, if the landlord situation were to go slightly awry, we could actually find ourselves homeless. I'm not an alcoholic. I earn decent enough money. How could I be homeless? And yet it's like, well, you might very well be, and that's a thought that's going to keep people up. People are looking at all that. Even something as simple as like I'll just like, I don't usually get personal or kind of talk about my own life too much, because for obvious reasons. But I moved into a house just a few months ago, where I am now, obviously, and I had to pay, and the reason I mentioned this is not my own personal thing, but I know that this is, as an axiom, is going to be true for tens of thousands of people currently, is the fact that you sort of have to buy a house that maybe for the same price, even a few years ago, you would have gotten you would have gotten a much better house. But now you have to take a house that, in effect, like you can buy a house now that 7 years ago, 8 years ago, could have been half the price or something like that, right? And so either you got a good house or you got a house that needed a bit of work, but because you got it cheap, you would have a good bit left over to do the work. And of course, it was cheaper to get people in to do jobs and all that. So I kind of look at it like I have a new perspective, because I used to worry about being a renter and, if only I could have a house. And now I look at it kind of differently, and I go like, okay, so and I'm very grateful for what I have. It's a nice house in its own way, but I kind of go, well, if the margin, basically for like a reasonable price, like an average cost of a house, let's say in Ireland, now if you're getting less of a house, but I'll just like give you an example, right? Because I'm kind of skirting around. But let's say you get into a house, and instead of it being all done to perfection, now you're getting much less of a house for the money. And you look around at something like rewiring, right? Of course, you move into, like, everyone's probably had this experience. You move into a house and you start, as a man especially, looking around at all the potential pitfalls. So, what's her name? Stella O'Malley talked about this recently, that the brain is the problem-solving organ, so it makes us worry, right? But so naturally, you look at all the issues and you go, okay, something like, what's the biggest thing you could have to get done in a house is like something like rewiring. And so there's going to be a lot of people in houses going, well, I'm let's say mortgaged up to my eyeballs, and the grocery shopping costs a lot of money. Everything has gotten tight. So what happens now if I need to get a full rewire? I don't really know how these things work. It might not be an issue for me at all, but I'm just this is kind of like a thought experiment. If you've to go rewiring your house and you're a middle class person, that you're not on any dole or any grants or any of that kind of stuff, but you're, like most people aren't, you're not mad rich, and you're already deep into a mortgage and the cost of living and all that, and cars, maintaining cars, everything, just life in general. And you're looking at it going, well, I mean, if hypothetically I'm forced to spend 20 grand on this, and then the other something else goes and something else goes and something else goes, you're not going to be able to call into the office in town, the citizens information, the social welfare, the help me office or whatever. If you call into them and you say, I have these things that are fundamental and like they have to be done, and it's not safe, or it doesn't work, or my utilities are gone, or whatever it is, and you say, I can't afford that. I mean, what am I going to do? I mean, as far as I'm aware, your position would be, the response you would get is that's just your problem. Like, and if you said, well, I know it's my problem, but I can't afford X, Y, and Z. Let's say 5 things went wrong at once or whatever. They would just say, this is your problem. I don't know. Meanwhile, they're talking about renovating and building up these properties for these migrants. Again, most of them complete spoofers. Renovating these properties. Of course, all these properties are going to be, any property that's renovated is not going to be done to some bare minimum. It's going to be done up to good standards and all that. And they'll have smoke alarms everywhere and everything done up right. It's completely fair for an average Irish person to say, well, I mean, okay, so why does he get that? Why does the guy with the 2 Porsche Cayennes and the 1.5 million in the bank and all of this kind of stuff, why does he get a house that he doesn't have to worry about anything. If there is an issue with it, he'll call up the liaison officer, whatever it is, and say, pipes burst or whatever, and some guy comes down in a van and does it. Why does my life and my children and everything matter less than his? Why is that? He's not even Irish. He's rich. What's going on? And someone, and we go back to because I wanted to refer this back to the original thing about foreign interference online because American people posted about Newtownmountkennedy. Take what I just mentioned there, the complete gross. Anyone with common sense can tell you that it's completely unfair and egregious under the circumstances in the country for most people at the moment. Instead of addressing that and just saying, listen, what's your answer to that? Because we're the supposed far right in all this, the majority of people in the country. But instead of addressing that, someone like Paddy Cosgrave in his big house in Donegal, flying all over the world, and God bless him, right? I don't resent people for being successful, but someone like that, or some NGO person, or Helen McEntee, instead of just addressing that and saying, listen, you have to talk about that. What is your answer to my point there? They say foreign interference, because people posted about it on Twitter. Anyone in Ireland who talks about it is far right and an agitator and all of this. And again, it's Baghdad Bob. It's like, listen, this isn't going to go away because you talk full of shit, effectively, right? And you come up with the most harebrained theories to avoid addressing the central issue. And just to speak about it here, right? So even further. So we have this from reportedly from Newtownmountkennedy just today, and it's, I don't know the background, I don't know did a migrant start some problem, or are Irish people just really angry? I don't know. You just take the footage at face value. So this is from Newtownmountkennedy. This is the level of frustration that's going on. And again, these people's frustrations are not addressed by talking about tinfoil hat conspiracy theories about people posting on Twitter.
You stay every time, then.
I'll just, by the way, this is from theliberal.ie, so I'll just read you their caption to give you whatever their context they put on it. We'll run with that. This is what the government has done to Ireland. Irish patriots have had enough of migrants being planted in their towns. Quote, don't fucking hang around this town, unquote. Locals in Newtownmountkennedy tell migrants they're not welcome, and to get the hell out of the town, the government are trying to destroy our country with population replacement. Okay, so that's your little editorialism there on it, we'll say. But this is the temperature. I mean, what do you expect? Do you pepper spray and fly around in helicopters and all that with Newtownmountkennedy, and then you insert all these migrants in, and you expect, what do you expect? People to go, oh, well, you know, all that frustration, you expect that to just dissipate, right? That's not how human nature works.
You stay every time, then.
Get over here, Nick! Go! Get the fuck! Go! Go! Get the fuck out! Come back down! Fucking tell your fucking head out! Don't fucking hang around this fucking town!
So yeah, that's that. But that's the level of frustration we're at, and I suppose it leads me in. I'll just do one or two more things, and they're kind of in keeping. It's a good flow tonight, actually. It can be hard to stream, like figuring out how you're going to link one thing to another. Everything just seems to be linking up nicely tonight. I suppose that's the nature of issues, or these issues. Just to remind you, you can super chat as well. I mean, I'd be doing myself an injustice not to just remind you. If you want to super chat, support the channel. If you want to ask a question, you know, feel free. Just what else? There was this like Mary Coughlin calling. I won't spend long on this. It's not a big issue or news story, but she's a singer in Ireland. She's on like the Late Late Show every 2 years talking about her mental health or music or whatever it is, right? I think that's what she is. I don't really know or care. But she says, what have we become, Irish racist thugs? So she's part of this chattering class, effectively, you know, living in a little bubble. I think she herself lives in Wicklow. And she says, someone says, replies to her and says, no, we've become afraid in our own country I don't know these people, but I was in Courtown the last few days and I don't recognize anything. I'm not safe. Something like that. And she replies and says, I'm more afraid of Irish racists when I walk around. Again, nonsense, right? Nonsense on its face, because for one, why would you be afraid of Irish racists? You're Irish. So even if the caricature of racists was true, why would you be the target of it? Surely you'd be immune, right? You're safe or something, right? So again, just nonsense. And this one was worse. I thought this was awful. And of course, she lives in this nice big house in the middle of the country, and she's all good, and she's probably got loads of money, and regime insider access and all that. Life's sweet when you're involved and when you're like a system darling or whatever. But so someone said, we didn't become this. This is what the average Irish person has always been. So we've always been racist and terrible, right? And she says, I guess you're right, but it's getting worse. So she's basically granting, oh yeah, no, we always have been like, and by racist it means malicious and malevolent. We've always had a malevolent quality to us. I mean, imagine if you went to an Amazonian tribe or Ghanaian or something, and some sort of appointed cultural spokesperson or whatever was sort of speaking about it as a given that, oh yeah, no, we're bad, like we're racist, we're the worst people in the world. Again, I come back to the people who are, and this doesn't apply to her, but the single mother or whoever, right, who's looking at the groceries and thinking, I'm worried. And in fact, I'm going to feed my kids, but I'm only going to take a sliver off the side. And I'm going to go to bed afterwards, and I'm going to have a grumbling tummy, and I'm just going to maybe have coffee in the morning to get rid of the hunger. Stuff like things that are just would make you cry to think about, right? These are happening to Irish people while all these other injustices piled on top of it. And someone like her is just living in this fantasy land where Irish people are the bad guys fundamentally, and foreigners are hapless victims and all of this. And if you, again, here's another question I always say, I've tried to say to people online, it's because we can never have like actual face-to-face discourse. But for example, anyone like this, and I encourage you to go, this is a very good rhetorical device, right? To just say to someone like that, to say, I know you're not racist, right? God bless you. And I know you're pro-migration, you're pro-cosmopolitanism, you're pro-migrants and all. I'll grant you that, right? God bless you. You're wonderful. But Ireland being a small territory of 5 million people currently, even under your premise of your pro-migration, your anti-racism, and insofar as there's deprivation, it's the fault of the government policy. It's not to do with competition with migrants. This kind of Liam Cunningham type thing, or Mary Coughlin. Okay, I'll grant you that, but we're adults as well, though, right? So let's have let me ask you a reasonable adult question. Given that that's the case, I grant you the premise. Would you grant me the premise that there is a point at which you would have to turn around and say, okay, that's too much. I love migrants and I hate racism, but just on a numerical, basic resource level, it's not possible. They would say, no, I'm not racist. Fine, grand. But what I'm saying is that at a certain point, Ireland is 5 million people. At a certain point, it would be too much. Name me your point at which you yourself, with all your anti-racist credentials and all of this, name me the point at which you yourself would acknowledge that now it's just too much, just numbers wise, it's just not feasible in any common sense capacity. Is it 100,000 people? Is it 200,000 people? And then if that's not enough for them, you say, is it 500,000 people? We're talking about annual numbers. Is it 500,000 people? Maybe not, I don't know. Is it 1 million people? Is it 10 million people? Is it 50 million people? Ireland is 5 million. Is it 50 million people in a year? Would that be not too much? Would it be the case that if it were 50 million people, that we could integrate that or something? And of course they would roll their eyes and they would say, don't be ridiculous, it's not 50 million. And you go, I know, but what I'm saying is if it's not, okay, 50 million, you'll maybe acknowledge via your eye roll that's preposterous. Let's say it's 1 million. Is that preposterous? 1 million in a country of 5 million, they might. And so what I'm trying to do is work your number down. If 50 million is ridiculous, if 5 million is ridiculous, and you won't refuse to answer my question, because that I'm just being glib if I say 5 million. If I say 1 million, am I still being glib? If I say 500,000, am I still being glib, or now are you getting towards where you say, no, that's doable? I need, if you're going to make an argument, I need your number, or I need a rough approximation, because maybe you say the 250,000 that came in recent years annually, maybe you're saying that that's just the right amount. Maybe it's too much, maybe it's too little, but you need to come back to me, because otherwise I'm not dealing with a human being. I'm not dealing with a rational adult. We can't have conversations. And that's what I would love to ask someone like her, with someone like this Mary Coughlin. What are we talking here? Like, at what point am I not just a racist and a this and a that? At what point is it fair enough for me to say, well, this isn't fair on Irish people or anyone else in the country, and it's not sustainable in any fashion, healthcare wise, housing wise? What is the number? Is it 500,000? Because when you come back to me with that, then we can continue with the conversation. You have your perspective, I have mine. We compete, we discuss. But until then, you're just a lunatic. You're just a fanatic, a cult member who cannot be reasoned with in the slightest. So anyway, moving on from that. So we've had all of that. There's another one here. So it's just speaking about the resource pressures. There was this guy, and this is from a few days ago, Radio Genoa. I think it's a big Zionist account. I'm not a major fan, but just, and I'll wrap up in like 10 minutes. There's not much left, we'll say. But there's this guy here. So this guy, it's funny. The guy who shoots the video, he's a great YouTuber. I don't know his name. Forgive me, but he does really good videos, and he's like Polish or something. He's got a kind of twang of Irish accent, so he's been around for a while, but he's like Eastern European. But he does really, he's against like globalist agenda, mass immigration, all that. And he does these videos, these kind of vox pops, or whatever, is it gonzo journalism or video? But he just goes up to people and talks to them, and somehow he establishes, I don't know how he does it, it's very impressive, establishes a cordial relationship with the interviewee, and a sort of gets the guard down. I don't know how he does it, but he does. So he's here in what looks to me like Mountjoy Square Park, where I used to live. And he's talking to this migrant. I remember seeing tons of these kind of people around. Now, this guy's sitting with his legs folded as if he's like having a cigar on the Late Late Show or something, chilling out in the middle of the day with his hood up and his like tracksuit on. A grown man, right? If I'm a grown man, he's certainly a grown man. He looks even more jaded than I am, we'll say, right? This is not some little kid.
When you came to Ireland, yes? Where do you stay? Where do you live in? That's hotel, or is it apartment? Apartment. Just room, yes? Okay. And how many people in the room?
2.
So which is okay, isn't it?
2 is okay.
So it's okay.
Because more than 2 disturbance created.
Yeah, I know. So and
and
how does it works? When did you came to Ireland? You said 8 months ago, yes? From England.
I just see someone in the chat says, I've never seen anyone have a cigar on the Late Late Show. Well, you've never seen Shane McGowan and all of them back in the days of Gay Byrne smoking fags and drinking pints on the Late Late Show. So technically I'm right, but point taken. So listen to this anyway.
England or from Afghanistan?
Afghanistan through different groups.
Okay.
We say my English is so weak.
Your English is good, yeah. You're very good English, like, so very nice. So, and you have a free food as well here?
Yeah.
In hotel or?
Money.
Okay. Nice. But Ireland is beautiful, isn't it? It's beautiful. Yeah.
We are not wandering here and there. We have just seen this place. The people say that it is so beautiful when you go in entire Ireland.
Okay.
But we have seen just this city, Dublin.
Just the Dublin. Okay. Nice. So, what about your passport paper? If you lost your passport, lose it, or you have your passport? And when you came to Ireland, yes, you apply for asylum seeker, yes. And do you have your passport with you, or you don't have it?
No, I have identity. Our country, what we say, just like paper of Afghanistan, I have admitted to that.
Okay. And do you have any family here as well?
No.
Back there in Afghanistan, yes, your family. Have a wife, one wife.
Now, again, this is a tired cliche, but it's true. Like all of these cliches, there's truth to it, which is that, well, if you're fleeing war, and I know Afghanistan did have war and strife and all this for a while and all that, but, and I don't want to keep saying the same stuff, but I don't believe even in I don't think, I think asylum is illegitimate under all circumstances, no matter what, as currently practiced. Because if you're in Afghanistan and you should just, it's a large country, there isn't war in every pocket of it. If it's poor, so be it. A lot of the world is poor. Ireland can't absorb those problems en masse for the whole world. It's not sustainable for us. But even under the premise, I suppose the allegation, the idea is that you're fleeing war or strife or something. Well, if there's strife there, you're not worried about your wife and your children who are there. Again, this is one of those cliches, but it's just true. I mean, if the war and the strife was so bad, would you not all have made your way here? Or at the very least, would you not have sent your wife instead of yourself? Or to say, if we can only afford one, and this is nonsense because it's not the reality, that's not the issue, but say your excuse was that I can only afford one plane ticket. Would you not, would you not just send your wife or send one of your older kids or something like that to like plant the flag? At least they'll be safe from this devastating war. But no, you have this guy wandering around Dublin, sitting around on park benches at 2 o'clock in the day. And listen to how many family
Wife,
he's
two
has.
wives and children. How many kids? 6 kids. Okay.
6 kids, right? Now they're all going to get here, if he's telling the truth, let's say. They're all going to get here and they're going to be eventually end up in a house. Obviously, they're going to end up in a house for 6 kids and the 2 of them. So a house for 8, right? And a house for 8 that'll probably have the B or A2 rating and the oil tank out the back and or whatever it is. Sorry, I don't know how it works, but point being, like I spoke about earlier with rewiring and what if this goes and what if that goes and how am I going to get by on this and that and all these things. If him and his family of 8 get into a nice comfortable house, they won't have to worry about any of that. Again, they'll just integrate themselves. It's not like, oh well, no, we're all going to go out to work and whatever. I'm not speaking about this person specifically. I can't defame him or whatever. I'm speaking in a general sense, the likes of this person. Largely speaking, they're just going to try and integrate themselves into this dependency system and milk it for all it's worth. And so it's the house, it's the dole, it's the children's allowance for all the 6 kids, it's blah, 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 whatever. And like I say, oh, well, if let's say you have an oil tank, let's say your oil tank breaks, you don't have to say, or wears down, you don't have to say, okay, well, I'm going to have to go out and spend €1,000 on now a new oil tank and installation and all this stuff, or one of a million different problems. It's not your problem at all. You're living like a babysat child. So you can just chill out starting now and eventually end up in this house with your 6 kids. And meanwhile, and I come back to me and I'm better off than probably a lot of people as well. Not massively at all, but like, you know what I mean? There's people who have it better and worse, right? But it's that kind of, that argument of, you know, they used to say they took our jobs, like the caricature of a racist or whatever, as if, oh, well, it's not zero sum. No one's taking your job and taking your house. Excuse me, it is zero sum, right? Because if you're going to put someone like him or someone from Georgia or wherever into a house and give them everything and it's going to be all good and they get to chill out, and ultimately that costs, basically, if you're talking about a family of 8, hundreds of thousands every year, and workmen to come and do the job without even worrying about it, and free dentist and doctor and the whole lot, right? Well, actually, no. Whether it's you or me or anyone else, it's like, well, that same money and capacity that was spent on that, had you not given it to him, you could have just given it to me, or you could have given it to some single mother, you could have given it to some old lady who's worried about paying the heating bill and all this stuff. You could have given it to an Irish person, and there's plenty of Irish people suffering hardcore now. So it is zero sum. And so people have to sit there and watch a guy like this talk about, oh, well, my 6 kids are on the way, you know, and all this, sitting in the park at 2 middle of the day. Like, again, we're back to the, and if you have an issue with this, if you say, listen, this is nuts, this is not fair, we're back to American Twitter users who are apparently making all this up.
So basically, you would like to take them here to Ireland, yes? But first of all, you have to get a house, is it?
I think it is necessary. If you will get a house, then you bring it.
Oh, once you get the house, and you bring.
Oh, I think I get the house and then I bring the 6 kids over. Yeah,
people, families.
It's great. Good for you. You know. I think I get the house and then I bring the 6 kids over. Yeah, is how it works. I mean, meanwhile, Irish people take out, what is it? Someone buys if you're, let's say, I saw recently there was a house for like 200 grand in Naas, and it was an absolute dive. It was like a slum. It was totally broken down. If you had to move in, it was nearly 200 grand. And by the way, Naas isn't Dublin city centre, right? Naas is considered in the commuter belt now and stuff, but I mean, it's not exactly like you're living in the middle of the city next to the theatre and all this kind of stuff. You're still living out, like, you know. And in Naas, it was like nearly 200 grand for this house that was small and it was rotting. Like, a lot of the rooms were literally, the walls and stuff were rotting. So I figured out that it was something, what was it? Like, you would have to have a salary of 45 odd grand, somewhere there, which is actually the average salary in Ireland. You would have to have that. And then this is in order to get a mortgage for that house. And then you would have to have about 20 grand in deposit. So you have to have, which is a tall order for a lot of people these days. You'd have to have 20 grand just sitting in your bank account. You'd have somehow managed to have to scrape that together. And then you would have to have an average salary in Ireland just to be able to get this house. And if you move in there, if you wanted to live in any kind of habitable condition in there, you would immediately, I'm not a tradesman, but I assume if you were to bring that house not up to a luxury standard, but up to a reasonable standard, like a basic house where the walls are not rotting and the pipes work and various, some leak in the attic, damp, all, you name it. I'd say with the cost of building now and stuff like that, and all sorts of trades jobs, because they're also busy on asylum centres and immigrating, I assume you'd need, if I were to move into that house that I was looking at, I'd be looking at it going, I better have nearly 6 figures just sitting there waiting to be pumped in as necessary as I go. And of course, if you're on your 45 grand salary and you already have your 20 grand deposit, what are you going to do? You're screwed. What if you have kids in that environment? An unhealthy, dangerous environment, probably fire hazards, everything, the whole rigmarole, right? So you're screwed, right? And so it's, what do you do in that situation? Meanwhile, this guy is saying, what's he saying? Oh, I think it's house first, and then I bring the 6 kids over.
Oh, once you get the house, and you bring the people, families. And how old are your kids? How old? The biggest one, the older one?
This one, 6 years.
So very small. 6.
6.15, I think.
6. So you have 6 kids, yes?
6 years.
So what age? How many? 6?
5, 4,
5.
2, 1.
Okay, so
yeah, so that's the reality. This guy is doing great work, this Polish guy or whoever he is. I wish I had his channel. He's doing okay. But like, you don't see an interview like this on RT, on the Late Late Show. You don't, when you get the Syrian on, who's either like a handsome Syrian guy who's like baking bread for the local poor people, and the weather's not very good, but sure, look, and or you get the Ukrainian supermodel who's like, I come to Ireland, and and it's like this propaganda thing where it's like the best picture you can imagine, and they say, oh well, we've been volunteering locally and all that propaganda. Well, you don't get this guy on, this is the reality. So you actually do have to go online to get the reality. And that's why people are completely losing faith in, whether it's Helen McEntee or whether it's RTE or whether it's Paddy Cosgrave with his recent nosedive into bullshit, or any of the rest of them, or the academics. So anyway, the final thing I want to look at was this guy in Aughrim in Wicklow. So I assume most of you probably have seen the video, but it was Darren McGovern was trying to politely implore this guy, contractor, who was working on an alleged asylum center, which is now disputed, but doesn't matter. It was believed by the people there, at least, to be due to be renovated into an asylum center, and maybe it is. I don't know. There's so much lies. Then how can people be expected to believe anything? Darren McGovern, basically a candidate in Wexford at the moment for Ireland First, he tried to persuade the guy heart to heart. And then this other guy, the whole town were baying and angry. Like I say, the whole town, like a crowd of about 20, 30 people. They were just angry, and they wanted to say, listen, just fuck off, basically. Put down your tools and go away. And so while Darren McGovern was doing the good cop approach, this other guy, local, hot-headed for sure, some people had criticisms, but he said, just pack your tools, you have an hour to go, just go, right? And again, I'll just give you the TLDR. He's been arrested, right? Or at least I believe it to be this person has been arrested anyway. Or it comes across that way. And it's sad because, of course, there were multiple people arrested for the fracas in Newtownmountkennedy There's people arrested. This guy is now arrested. Like, you know, it's so sad that people like Mel Sutcliffe is not arrested, because Mel Sutcliffe is a big developer, Quanta Capital, buying up properties, evicting people, putting migrants in, making millions, and all of this. Total like rubber face scumbag. But in my view, that's my opinion. But these people are not getting arrested, because if I go to the guards, just like Jana London was talking to the guards and they were trying to get smart with her, if you go to them and you say, well, why isn't he arrested? They'd say, he hasn't broken a law. Everything he's doing technically is within the law and completely legitimate. Okay, so we have and this other guy who, or whether it's the Newtownmountkennedy people, whether it's this guy here, anyone else, these people who are just standing up for what the majority of people are against, and they are given no other option by the state, politically, fire hazard complaints, planning objections. They're not given any other avenue at all to oppose this. When they just do what they feel like they have to do, which is get hot under the collar about it, and they're really small fish in the grand scheme of things, next to your Mel Sutcliffe, next to your Banty, next to your Helen McEntee and all this, when they are forced into a position of extreme frustration and desperation, then they're carted off to jail. But Banty's fine. Banty, with his shell companies, with all his nephew's dog's roommate, who owns a little shell company that earns 5 million on migrants, that's legal. That's grand. He's not arrested at all. In fact, he's a great man. He's a great man for a pint, and he knows the guards, and he knows the local meat factory owner, and he buys flags for the under-12 SCA. He's wonderful. But these people forced into a desperate position end up in a paddy wagon. It's terrible. But I'll just play you the original video.
Whether they have charges, we already know there are terrorists in here. Look at the demographic of the people here today. Elderly people, young people, and their kids are in school. All we're asking, hang on, let's speak. All we're asking is for the Irish people to help each other. We have to stick together. And the only way we can do this is by working collectively. Look, you see what's going on. You know what's happening in this country. You know what's happening in this country. Okay? And I know you have a mortgage, I know you have bills to pay. We all do.
Get out! With your fucking crew! Get the fuck out! In the van! Get out! Now! In your fucking van! Get out! Get the fuck out!
Pack up yourself and go, man.
Go on! You too! Get the fuck! What are you standing there for? Why do you pack your tools up? Please!
Yeah,
I give me an hour. Get the fuck out, or I'll pack your fucking tools up.
You can understand the frustration of the people, and it's warranted there. It is warranted. Side with the people.
He wants to go, just go, man.
We're not talking anymore.
Side with the
That's
people.
it. We're fed up. Fed up.
Go on, man.
Why is you? You think you have a fucking brain in it, wouldn't you?
No, we're going to do that. Johnny Cap.
I don't give a fuck. I've had it up to here.
Your country. Your country.
Hang on, have a listen.
1 hour. We're going to hours to get out. 1 hour. We'll be gone.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, what he said is he's prepared the police team off site and he'll be gone within an hour. So,
Thank you.
I ask that everybody remain here and give them the opportunity
Give a hand.
to pack their stuff
Give a hand.
and let them leave.
I don't get in an hour. Give a hand.
Can you give a guarantee to the people here that you won't be back to this premises? Or you won't?
Well, I have 2 machines to do. So maybe
We can help you.
No, you just stay here.
Can you give a guarantee to the people
Don't
here?
put anything.
right. I give you one.
BAC construction.
So yeah, look, the guy, you know, is this like the guy? He wasn't actually being violently threatened. Let's say. I mean, the guy. I know he's shouting at him, but he's exasperated. But so the story is now, so. Man arrested over public order offences at Wicklow Hotel. A man has been arrested in connection with an incident in County Wicklow earlier this week, during which builders renovating a hotel were shouted at and told to leave the site. The Department of Integration confirmed the building is not being prepared for international protection applicants. Yeah, right. I mean, they've said that for so many that actually do end up being developed for that. And why would anyone not err on the side of skepticism anyway to begin with, given that there's been so many lies? So if there is confusion and if there is misinformation, it's the fault of the government who've broken all sorts of trust with people. The man who was in his 30s was arrested in Auckland this morning and is being detained in Wicklow. So it's just kind of like it's kind of sad because there's no other option. And this guy, in effect, was doing, like, it's one of the, I said this with Sean Meehan too, that in general, I would respect planning law and that the rules have to be the rules. But it's the problem is the overall picture and the fact that the law breaks down when there isn't a bigger ethos undergirding the law that is relatively fair. Well, that's true here too, generally speaking, which is the narrative that the regimists will put out. The idea that someone would be doing work, even if it's not to your taste, that they would just be doing their work as a private contractor or business person, that you would shout at them and sort of strongly implore them, we'll say, to cease work and leave, even though the work they're doing is technically legal and all that. In general, I'm a believer in sort of the law, I suppose, and in isolation, in a situation like that, I would say, well, yeah, that person, I suppose that has to be illegal. I mean, people can't go around and just dictate terms as they please, as they go. The problem is that we're not in normal times, and what the government is doing, in effect, is much more wrong and much more illegitimate than anything that this guy did by shouting. And so what you end up doing is the big crime is sort of protected, which is what's being done by the state. And then the small crime, which is the reaction to that, which is given no other outlet, is hammered on hard by the state. And small fish, ordinary people who are just passionate, desperate, and frustrated are given the hammer. That's not right. The 4 people who were arrested and in Newtownmountkennedy, that's not right. Maybe you can point to an individual aspect of what went on there and say, well, that was technically a crime. But it's like, again, the bigger picture matters here. It's like, well, what really is relevant is that what everyone in the town was protesting against and the majority of the country are against just simply shouldn't be happening. And everything that happens after that fact is sort of moot. And it's not right, or it's not fair to be persecuting these people. You should just be listening to them. But the other point I'll make as well is that Darren McGovern kind of, I actually put up that clip, others did too, but I put up that clip which is edited. Now I just reflected what was already publicly available on Darren McGovern's page, but I edited it just for convenience purposes for the internet to digest. And I edited it. I didn't sort of selectively edit it. What I did was I put in about half the video, as you saw, was Darren McGovern, who was doing this not long-winded, but he was doing this kind of like softly approach with the guy, trying to convince him. And then it cut kind of to where the crowd slightly turned against Darren and they just were more in favor of the guy who was shouting and just taking the direct action. They all started applauding and backing him. And then Darren was left just kind of having to just watch as the rest of it unfolded. But Darren was the one being diplomatic and trying to keep it above board, we'll say, right? And it just reminds me that they will come out and call Darren McGovern far right and running for a far right party and all of this. And they'll say the same for me and all that. And I'm just reminded that, like, and I've always believed this, is that we are the ones who you call the extremists and the radicals and the agitators. We're the moderates. I'm a political analyst, activist, journalist, whatever, right? And I have ideas and I'm participating in the democratic forum as I see it. And what I'm saying is that I don't want any crimes. I don't want any sort of unpleasantness, and I don't want any chaos. What I want is conversations, political moderation and reasoning between the likes of me and the state. I want to reason. I sit here and I talk. How long have I been on for now? An hour and 43 minutes. I sit here and I talk and I go through it and I painstakingly plead and beg for reason. And that's what I'm doing. And I understand the ins and outs of it. And I understand the legal pitfalls. I know how to stay out of trouble. Eventually they might come for me and everybody else. They'll just make up laws. But I know how to play the game. And so does Darren McGovern, as you could see. He knew because, and that's my point about my editing the video. I edited the video to show both sides of it. But what you didn't see was some of the in-between, which is where Darren McGovern is trying to be soft and reasonable with the guy. And the contractor, and then the other guy gets irate and hot under the collar and starts shouting. And Darren does try to, because Darren knows what he's doing. He's familiar with the game. Darren tries to say, no, hey, just calm down or whatever. But then he ends up losing the crowd a bit and people go with the hothead. But in hindsight, now that your man has been arrested, now you can see that Darren was trying to save your man's ass in a way, which is to be like, I know you want to get hot under the collar and I know you're annoyed, but, you have to be careful. Unfortunately, we're in this position where the laser is on us a little bit. And so Darren was trying to be the diplomat. And in effect, my point is that whether it's Darren or me or any of the other activists or you know, posting online and stuff, we're trying to say, we don't want people to be put in positions. We don't want chaos. We don't want kinetic uncertainty, a sort of people in Newtownmountkennedy shouting whether the migrant was doing something bad or not. But either way, this kind of social dysfunction happening where people are put in all these positions. We don't want people having to get into brawls with the riot police up in Newtownmountkennedy. We want to be political. We want to be reasonable and solve it through compromise, right? And it's just mad how we're painted as the far right and the extremists and the radicals and all this stuff, when it's like, actually, if you were an alien looking down from outer space, you would recognize that we are the people who are trying to say, listen, people in Ireland are absolutely seething. This situation is completely unpredictable, and you just keep forcing things on a population that they do not want. And that is a volatile scenario. And what I'm doing is I'm saying, let me talk for hours. I've been thinking about this for years. I'm not just a person who's had enough and gotten angry and all this kind of stuff, who doesn't know the game inside out, who doesn't know the background and all this kind of stuff. I'm not just someone who's angry, but there are a lot of people out there who are driven to just sheer anger, desperation, and frustration. And we don't want that. That's not good for society. It's not good for anyone. So let's just talk about it. And you see that in that video. And it's maybe your man would stand over his actions. He got hot-headed and all that. But the point is that, you know, the moderates, the people who are talking about the political ideas and running for office and doing live streams and all of this, we're trying to just make the argument. And so to pigeonhole us as some kind of extremist, we're the only people in the room who are taking the position, the advancing the argument of the majority of people in the country who are seething and frustrated. And we're trying to channel that into reason. And it's not even that, because I mean, I could say we're trying to channel it. We've been talking about it long before people got frustrated. So, but it's like, we've always been there to try and make the argument. I don't know, I'm kind of rambling, but it's like, it's just, you know, you can keep going with this. You can just drive people increasingly mad. And I don't know what the agenda is to do that, but, you know, it just goes to show that, like, you can have people just popping off and getting angry on the street and feeling like they have to push back on riot police to protect their town from being invaded with plantation. And, you know, it seems like they almost like they want that. And but then the sad part is that they bring the hammer down on people who step outside the lines then in situations like this. And of course, they'll throw the book at all these people. And it's just very sad, you know, and I don't know, I just feel bad about that basically. But I mean, I don't want to end on a sad note here, but you know, someone like him is thrown in jail, and again, someone like Mel Sutcliffe and Helen McEntee and all that, they're dripping in money, and they're everything they do is perfectly legal, and all of that, and it's just very sad. You know, Irish people, I suppose, is what I'm saying. Ordinary Irish people who, they're not political activists, they're not journalists, they're not candidates or anything. They should not be put in a position where they end up being persecuted and targeted hard by the state because they lost the head or whatever it is. They're being put in that position. The state cannot come out and claim otherwise. It's like, I don't know, it's like being in a bar and pissing someone off constantly, nudging them, pushing them, you know, or whatever, and eventually getting to the point where they turn around and push you, and suddenly you claim that they're attacking you. It's like, it's kind of like that. It's just it's a completely unfair situation. You're just trying to get people to offer themselves up like that. And I don't know, I hope that guy does okay now. I don't know what'll happen with the guards and the prosecution and all of that, but clearly what that guy was doing, at least in his mind, was just standing up for his community. How could people not be getting irate at this point and losing the head? That's I've spoken about the poverty, the injustice of everything. People have to see it every single day, all this nonsense being put out, and they're meant to just suck it up. That's just not going to happen. People are going to get angry, and the only solution is to be reasonable, and that's it. So anyway, I'll get to super chats there now, lads. Get to the old super chats. So, okay. So, I almost misread this title. Imperator Scotterum. I almost misread that one. It gives €2.49 and says the Garden of Remembrance at 2:30 p.m. on Monday. Yes, very good super chat to remind me. Yeah, I'll be there. Bank holiday Monday, and it should be a big one. What do these things achieve? It's debatable and all that, but everything adds up. Everything adds up. Like I've said, opposing these things in Newtownmountkennedy, it's worth it, even if the people go into the centre. Oh, by the way, can I? This is not really related to the super chat, but you know, one of the things is that in Newtownmountkennedy, for example, the migrants have gone in, and some people question what's the value of that. Well, a couple of years ago, I was driving through the Midlands, and I think it was Edgeworthstown or somewhere like that. This is years before radicalisation in Ireland about migration and all that happened. And I remember going through this town, wherever it was in the Midlands, and I remember seeing some sort of Pakistani or Middle Eastern guys walking around, probably worked in the kebab shop or whatever, that kind of thing, fully grown men, you know, whatever. And then I saw there was this girl, and she was about 15 or 16, and she seemed really nice. I think we ended up asking for directions from her because she was walking by, and she was very friendly, and it was, oh, thanks very much. And I remember thinking, this is a town where all I can see is, and then the Irishmen, all I could see in the town were bookies. There was like one or two dingy pubs, and then a bookies, and there were people coming in and out of the bookies totally defeated. The more virile men were the foreigners, right? And the Irish lads who remained in the town were totally kind of looked weak and depressed and sort of demoralized or whatever. You know, imagine the bookies, right, in the middle of the day. And I remember thinking, this is a recipe for Rotherham, like what we have here. And in terms of I said the other lads were the more virile sort of male population in the town. Of course, that town would have had a very good, solid, virile native population, but they're either in Dublin, they're in Australia, they're gone out, right? They've been ripped out. So the biological strength of that town has been ripped out, the core, the strong young men. And what it's been replaced with is these foreigners. And that could be a very potentially dangerous situation. And then you have these teenage girls around the place. You have a recipe for Rotherham there, and there's no radicalization within the native community. There's no strength. There's no even awareness, you know, because Rotherham could be happening. The grooming gangs could be happening, and because all the lads are in the bookies or they're pissed in the pub, and the old women are sitting by the heater in the house watching RT, and so no one's doing Overwatch here at all. This place is totally vulnerable to this situation, and I was just an instinctual thing, but just from what I saw in that town, it struck me really hard. I thought, if Rotherham isn't happening here already, it's about to. The conditions are perfect for it, and that's sad. That's really sad, and I can't save this place. I'm just me, you know. That's bad. I remember thinking that. Well, one of the things about Newtownmountkennedy is that, yeah, the plantation centre went in, but had the place not mobilized against it for weeks on end and gotten you know, wrapped up in the injustice of it, and they're all seething now and, you know, highly strung about everything. Well, one thing I know for sure is that no matter how many people they put into plantation centres there in Newtownmountkennedy, there'll be no grooming happening because of an apathetic population who are just completely away with the fairies. That won't be happening. The tone now in Newtownmountkennedy is a nationalist, it's resentful, it's aggrieved, and it's virile, and it's activated, right? That's how it is. So at the very least, you won't have some sort of grooming happening under the noses of completely asleep and defeated people. No way, right? So that alone is a massive win. That think about the real human cost that's spared there potentially by that environment. I hope you see what I mean. The difference in environment that's created by the experience had. That's worthwhile, you know. So even if the centre kind of went ahead and all that, that's to say that's worthwhile is just understating it. Roddy Murray, what's the crack, bro? Gives €10. Thank you very much, and says George Soros partially funded the Yes campaign, and these people let him. yet they complain about foreign interference because Irish Americans are shitposting about it. Hashtag Ireland is full. Unreal. Yeah, it's mad. It's like, think about when so-called marriage equality, gay marriage in Ireland passed. If you were to look at where did all the posts come from? I'm sure because Ireland has 5 million people, there was a certain amount of posts came from Ireland. But then again, if even one American for every 30 Irish people or whatever it is posted about that online, which I'm sure they did, and in the UK, that would still be a greater absolute number, obviously, because the internet, because it's a global news story, because it's whatever. Why would anyone have an issue? Oh, that's nuts. The foreign interference, like Roddy says, in Ireland is all these NGOs that are funded by Atlantic Philanthropies, by Indians who are trying to, there was a video, I should have played it tonight, of an Indian being like, oh, if you've been here 2 years and you, regardless of your visa status, you can vote, and I'll link you to like an Indian candidate who's running, so like basically you can vote for him. It's like, that's just sort of ethnic nepotism, like a complete like Banana Republic level of democracy, ethnic stuff. Like if an Irish person said, oh, I'll link you to the Irish candidates you can vote for, sure you'd be pilloried and sacked from your job and all that. But then it's totally normal. That's okay. That's not foreign interference when Indians who have basically zero connection to Ireland, let's be real, if you're here 2 years working a job inside in the IFSC, come on, right? That's not foreign interference. All this media and NGO stuff, not foreign interference, but a few people posting online about an issue in a country that's like, 70 times the size of Ireland. It's just, I mean, like Roddy says there, it's just absolutely ridiculous. It's silly to even have to address it, but that's what it is. F. Aaron Carty, interesting, nice, cool name. I'd love to have one of those names, like a F. What's his name? F. Roger Devlin or something like that. Cool name, cool setup of a name. Anyway, gives €5. Thank you very much, and says appreciate the frequent uploads. Who are they trying to convince with their deflections? Normies, investors, Montrose, or gaslighting themselves? Yeah, I don't know. It's just a weak attempt, intentional public stupidity, as I call it, just in order to retard discourse. We could be talking about the reality, and they could have their view, and we could have ours, and discuss it as adults. Just like, again, I know I have like the simping for China thing, but in China, the majority of the CCP are engineers, right? And in the West, in Ireland, it's like what primary school teachers and solicitors or something are politicians. Like the most, like, no disrespect to teachers and solicitors, but like that's the type of people you have running our country, or supposedly running our country. Whereas in a country like China, we say it's authoritarian and it's a basket case or something like that. That's the narrative. But of course, within the CCP, they're sitting down and they're looking at their problems and they're just addressing it on a factual basis. Like, let's just talk about it on a factual basis. Not everyone agrees. There's the industrialists who maybe want cheap labor, but then there's the majority of the population online and that who don't want immigration. And China's got a long history of insularity, and we're a stability-oriented people. So we have all these different interests, and then we have multinationals from abroad who are semi kind of participating in the society. So like, let's just sit down and try to like resolve all those things and move forward logically, right? That's what should be happening, but we're talking about total nonsense. Like, these people are again, whether they're convincing themselves or whether they're just deluded, I don't know, but it's just a pity that adults can't come to the table with differing perspectives and have discussions and debates. It's just sad that can't happen. Finola Omuraku gives €5 and says Ireland Shamrock. That's right. Thank you very much, by the way. Mr. Twisted Frenzy gives €20. Thank you very much. And says the strategy they're using is called repressive tolerance. I'm interested already. No matter what, you always give the benefit of the doubt to people on your side of the argument and give the least charitable interpretation to your opponents. I mean, I wish like people like Disney and right people would do that more, always kind of just never like take the argument against your own side or whatever. But yeah, that's a good point. James Bond gives £20. Okay, so it does different currencies. Thanks very much. And says, save the planet. The carbon dioxide in a pint of Guinness has the biggest global carbon footprint. Just stop Guinness. Okay. Just stop Guinness. Murphy's and Beamish only. That's just what I'm saying. Thanks very much. Armchair Limerick Nationalist gives €5 and says, sound for the Ramble Girl. Yeah, you're welcome. No bother. I enjoy doing this, and I appreciate all the super chats. Yeah, so I'll leave it there for tonight, and maybe be back again tomorrow night. Yeah, look, thanks very much for joining me again. Thank you for all the super chats. Like I said, my links are there. Follow my social media if you want. After the fact, if you're watching this, you can donate and support the channel if you want to as well, only if you can, etc. I'll probably stream again tomorrow night, but I'll see you soon regardless. And just to remind you as well, like the one of the super chatters said there, I'll just go back to it actually. I know I was about to finish, but I want to go back to it. Just to remind you, in case I'm not talking to you, but I think I will be. Garden of Remembrance, 2:30 p.m. on Monday. A big demo in Dublin. I'll be there, and lots of other people will. It's worth showing up to that, I think. So anyway, end stream. Thanks for joining me. Good night. Ihawa. See you.